Welcome, everyone, to the Apoco-Larry podcast. I'm Steve. He is
Larry.
Yeah.
We've been registering all week. I don't have energy to do
Yeah. We work in universities. We're on a first name basis now.
Yeah. We're worn out.
Yep.
Yeah.
My friend, but what's not worn out is this story of Esther. Oh my gosh, is this exciting?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not bad at all. And this one, there's very little to say. It's fairly self-explanatory.
Yeah.
But we'll stay stuff anyway, Steve.
Yeah, we're gonna make this good. Okay, folks. For those of you using the written word as opposed to the audible word, I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just going to start reading chapter 7, verse 1. Here we go. So the king and Haman went to Queen Esther's banquet. Remember, he just got picked up after he figured out all this stuff was happening around Mordecai. And as they were drinking wine on the second day, the king again asked, Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given to you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted. Then Queen Esther answered, If I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition. And spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we were merely sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king.
Yeah, she is as smooth can be, isn't she?
Mm-hmm.
And you said it, Steve, second day of the banquet. So I don't know. These banquets, I don't know what they do in between eating. Like for us, you eat and you watch a video and
yeah.
Some person that doesn't know music plays a song and then you go home. Wishing you were at a Rod Stewart concert instead. But she did it. She did the first night of the banquet. Now it's the banquet's just for them, but there are other people around.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then the king comes to her and says, what's your petition? I like what she says, my people are going to be destroyed. If they're only going to be sold into slavery, I wouldn't have said anything because I wouldn't want to bother you with something that trite. So that's when you say she's as smooth as can be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we go on to 5.
Okay, verse 5 now, folks. King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, Who is he? Where is he, the man who has dared to do such a thing? Esther said, An adversary and enemy, this vile Haman. Oof. Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in a rage, left his wine, and went out into the palace garden. But Haman, realizing that the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Now the king loves Haman, right? So that's why it was so dangerous for Esther to do something like this.
Right.
She was just one of his wives, but Haman was a guy that he had promoted so highly.
Right.
And he was crazy about Haman. Haman's a wealthy man.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But I like that Haman knew as soon as the king went into the garden, he thought, I'm in deep trouble here.
Yeah.
And then he starts begging Esther. And it gets crazy after this.
Yes.
So,
yes. Haman, who didn't really think through all the steps from this point forward.
No, she took him by surprise.
Yeah. Yes. Verse 8. Just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. Well, the king exclaimed, Will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house? As soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs attending the king, said, A pole reaching to a height of 50 cubits stands by Haman's house. He had set it up for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king. Oh, gosh. The king said, Impale him on it. So they impaled Haman on the pole that he had set up for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided.
Something, eh? Something. So he's begging the queen. He looks like he's going after her. But you see, there were other people there, because as soon as the king said what he said, these people took him, right? They grabbed him, they covered his face, and they hauled him out, and said there's. I kind of, in some ways, I prefer gallows, even though an impaling stake is probably more accurate to what the Persians did.
Okay.
Somehow that seems, it takes some of the funniness out of it when you're impaling a person.
Yeah. It makes
Hanging them seems okay, but impaling them, that's a rough go.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as you said, that was their kind of their chosen method of killing, right?
Yes. Well, it was one of the ways they killed, right?
Yeah.
It was one of the ways they killed. So he's got this 75-foot pole. We don't know how they got him on it. Whether they stuck it in him and then raised it up like a. We just don't know. But there he is. They killed him. They killed him right there on his own, on his thing that he built for Mordecai, and that is God's justice.
Yeah.
I had a friend, and he was building a business, and a Christian guy. So not everybody's going to like this story, but I'm telling it anyway. and he said the guy was supposed to do a whole bunch of work. He was doing a whole bunch of work for the guy. And then the guy said, "Yeah, screw you. I'm not going to pay you. What are you going to do about it?" And he said that week, the guy tripped and fell into his saw, and it cut him in half. Oh. And he felt like God said to him, "Yeah, you don't mess with my people."
Oh.
Yeah. So freaky story.
Yeah.
And it doesn't fit the New Testament, forgiveness and don't hold this to their account. But it fits the Haman story real well.
Yeah. And we do have a God that does exact vengeance on his enemies.
Yes.
Whether it's here on this earth or in the next, right?
Yeah. Lauren bought me a T-shirt that said, "God, will you please look after this? Because if I do, I'm for sure going to jail."
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, so Haman got the probably the perfect retribution. It was perfect retribution. But the story's not over yet.
Okay, now flip over to chapter 8 now, folks. Starting at verse 1. That same day King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, and Mordecai came into the presence of the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and presented it to Mordecai. And Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. Esther,
so let's just say, so remember, Haman was wealthy. Now, what they don't do in this story that they sometimes do in other stories is say what happened to the rest of Haman's family. And it wouldn't be uncommon in either Babylon, where it did happen, or Persia, for them to take vengeance on the entire family. But they don't say that. They just say they were obviously kicked out, and Mordecai got the whole thing. And he got the king's signet ring.
Yeah.
So Haman was so powerful that he had power to actually sign on behalf of the king.
Okay.
And that's what Mordecai, the Jewish guy, can do now.
Yeah. It's almost like he's acting as the king's emissary, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So Esther again pleaded with the king, falling at his feet and weeping. She begged him to put an end to the evil plan of Haman the Agagite, which he had devised against the Jews. Then the king extended the gold scepter to Esther, and she rose and stood before him. "If it pleases the king," she said, "and if he regards me with favor and thinks it the right thing to do, and if he is pleased with me, let an order be written overruling the dispatches that Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, devised and wrote to destroy the Jews in all the king's provinces. For how can I bear to see disaster fall on my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my family?" King Xerxes replied to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jew, "Because Haman attacked the Jews, I have given his estate to Esther, and they have impaled him on a pole he set up. Now write another decree in the king's name on behalf of the Jews, as it seems best to you, and seal it with the king's signet ring. For no document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked."
Yeah, so the king can't change his rule that they were going to go after the Jews on, a month. What was it, the 12th of Agdad or something? Agad. Anyway, so a year after he first started, almost, and the king, that was the king's law, so that can't be repealed. So that's kind of the key thing here. So what he's done is he's created another law that kind of doesn't supersede that law, but it allows the Jews something
Yeah.
as well.
Okay. Verse 9. At once the royal secretaries were summoned on the 23rd day of the third month, the month of Sivan. They wrote out all of Mordecai's orders to the Jews and to the satraps, governors, and nobles of the 127 provinces, stretching from India to Cush. These orders were written in the script of each province and the language of each people, and also to the Jews in their own script and language. Mordecai wrote in the name of King Xerxes, sealed the dispatches with the king's signet ring, and sent them by mounted couriers who rode fast horses, especially bred for the king.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Like the king even gave his own horses for this thing.
Right. He wasn't fooling around. So this wasn't like, oh, sure, yeah, we can do that thing. Yeah.
Hope you bunch of Jews do okay.
Yeah. Verse 11 now. The king's edict granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate the armed men of any nationality or province who might attack them, and their women and children, and to plunder the property of their enemies. The day appointed for the Jews to do all this in all the provinces of King Xerxes was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. The couriers riding the royal horses went out, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa.
Yeah, I don't think I said Adar just earlier, but it was the 12th of Adar.
Yeah, all good.
Sounds like a song on the 12th of Never. Oh, that's the 12th of Adar. I'll love you till the 12th of Adar. So we won't read that last little bit about the triumph because that's for next week. But for this one, it's just intriguing how far the king went with this thing. Like he said, these guys are still going to attack you, but I am going to make it okay for you to attack anybody of any nationality. And that's kind of important because even if a Persian went there and attacked, they were allowed to attack. And any country that has foreigners in the country has its own citizens and has others there. Their own citizens have special rights. And you know that with Persia, you know it with Babylon, you particularly know it with Rome.
Right.
You remember, I'm a Roman citizen. I bought my citizenship at a great price. What about you, Paul? I was born a Roman. Oh crap!
Yeah.
we're in big trouble now that we just whipped a Roman.
Right.
And so for him to say that you can attack anybody is really, really powerful stuff.
Right.
And by the way, you can have all their stuff after you kill them.
Well, yeah. I was just thinking, it wasn't just the fact that they could go out and, hey, let's get some swords, let's take care of this thing. It's like, go ahead and just take all their property and whatever all that entails. So it's not just a physical, it's also like a monetary thing. There's some status to it. All of a sudden, the Jews are raised up in terms of status. There's probably a little bit of hate because of that, but...
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Then eventually they're the main actors and directors in the movies.
Wow.
And it becomes very, very important. And it actually is. It's an incredible step that Xerxes just took.
Yeah.
And in a little while, they're going to let Zerubbabel go back to Jerusalem.
Yes.
So there's amazing things happening here. It is for the Jewish people.
It is kind of interesting to see the effect of the Jews on both Babylon and now Persia. This, right? You have Daniel and all this, right at the seat of power. Now you have Esther and Mordecai right at the seat of power.
Yeah,
it's quite fascinating.
Yeah, and yet when they get back to Jerusalem, who is the guy now? Who's the guy who rebuilt the walls? Nehemiah.
Nehemiah, yeah.
Nehemiah still lament that they are slaves, and what they mean there is, as wonderful as this is still Persia. This isn't our land yet, right?
Right.
And it never becomes their land until the time of the Maccabees,
Right.
and that's just a short period of time.
Yeah.
Well, it's not a short period of time, but you know,
But in terms of the history you and I've been looking at this spring, it seems pretty short, right?
it does, the Maccabean period, yeah. So and then that all happens, of course, we saw for other reasons, like, you know, there's the people that would have taken them over, the Seleucids are involved in other battles. Syria is involved in other battles, and so they don't have time for these guys.
Yeah.
And they had a period of peace, and God can do that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, when your enemy gets busy, you know, that's God keeping your enemy busy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is an incredible time for the Jewish people. They still had to be incredibly brave. I mean, they still had to fight all these people.
Right.
You know, so there's still stuff going on in this book.
Yeah. Mm.
But Haman Haman really messed up.
Yeah.
Really messed up.
Oi.
Yeah. And if you're people nowadays, like, and you want to go against the Jewish people, like whatever you believe about you know, history and God's place for the Jewish people, I always keep this a little bit in mind.
That's right. That's right. They still are his chosen people.
Yeah.
And he's still calling out to them, right?
And the whole church may be a part of that, you know, where the Jews and the Gentiles come together as the church. We may all be a part of that, but they're still his people.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point, Larry. That's a good point. Well, folks, wasn't that just a fun little insight, that little turn that they made where the story seems to plod along, and then all of a sudden everything happens so very quickly, as Esther just shocks Haman with, it's this vile man, evil and vile man that's trying to kill my people. Thanks so much, bud. That was fantastic. Folks, as always, we're so thankful that you join us on a weekly basis. We love doing this. We'd probably do it even if we had like one or two.
Even
other
if we did it for free, Steve.
Even three. Yes, even three. But hey, so just know just how thankful we are that you listen. And then, with that being said, we'll see you next week. Until then, I was Steve. He was Larry. This was the Apoco-Larry Podcast.